G'day, Obsessors. It's Sarge here, and today we're going to talk about what the 26th of January means to you, what it means to me, what it means to Kanat and Cory. Kanat, how are you today?
Just chewing some peanuts.
Cory, how are you today?
Yeah, good, man. How you doing?
Yeah, good. I'll give him a chance to eat his peanuts. Mate, it's good to have you along, mate, considering you're attached to this to Assessed Hub by proxy. Yeah. So but it's
that's
good
many perks.
It does, but it's good to actually have you on, mate. And we're, and you too, Kanat. We had you on last week about some other issues, but the fact that you're an Indigenous, awesome Indigenous person from, from our fine country here, and it's Australia Day tomorrow. Let's talk about what it means to you.
Yeah, look, thanks very much for having me. It's a great privilege and for me to sit here and share my thoughts. And I thank the Obsessive Hub.
Obsessive. Yeah, obsessive. We're all obsessed, mate.
The Hub for having me, and thanks, because it's such a it's a major topic that we live by. In terms of, it's interesting. I was just talking to some of my non-First Nations people this morning. It's like I physically have like something in my stomach, which always comes around this time every year for the last 20 years.
Yep. And what is that? Why is it anxiety, or is it happiness? Is it joy? Is it shame?
It's
sorrow?
sadness.
Sadness. And why is that?
Because we as a country, we're coming together to celebrate an invasion that wasn't very pleasant.
Well, here's my question. We talk about it, it's been talked about a lot in the last sort of decade or two, Invasion Day rather than Australia Day. And, there was a poll yesterday that I heard, happened, like I heard this morning, the results were that still more than 50% of the country don't want to change the date of Australia Day being the 26th of the January. I mean, what's your thoughts on changing the date?
Well, I like to think and look at the 50% who do.
Yep.
Because when I was a kid, that was probably 98% who didn't.
Of course. And we lived in a different world when you were a kid in Australia, and it was a lot more white, what was it called? White Australia policy?
White Australia policy,
yeah.
Correct.
And I've done, I have done a lot of reading on that in the last little while just to brush up on what it's about. So, but what does it mean to you?
Well, what it means to me, it touches back not just to my ancestors, but to all ancestors. The Torres Strait Islanders on the Torres Strait Islander First Nations.
Yep.
Our destruction was not as pronounced and as cruel as the first contact on the mainland.
Of course.
We've got stories of babies being buried in the sand and used as polo balls, and the colonizers would come and whack their heads off, completely off babies' heads. And we've got people celebrating that.
I'm going to just say that I don't think that the date should be changed. And Cory, I think maybe you've thought about this a lot in the last little while.
Yeah, so I wanted to jump on just to get a different perspective. Like, I was born and raised in New Zealand. So for us, the connection with the native people was completely different.
Yep.
It's very much a Māori culture over there, whether you're white, brown, Asian, whatever you are, you all inherited the Māori culture, and that's really strong over there. So my perspective, I've been here a long time, and I've seen how Aboriginal culture is depicted throughout Australia and all that kind of stuff. And it's great for merchandise and selling it. If you want to come over to Australia, check out the beaches and get a boomerang. But apart from that, I feel it hasn't been represented or appreciated in the right ways. And that officials or body officials that represent the country, they put things on like a sorry day, or we'll do a thank you before every rugby game.
Yep.
Like, I think, and no disrespect to Aboriginal culture or anything like that, I just think it's a bit tokenistic. And I think more of the culture within the arts, the performance, like the Māori, they do a haka. So we do a haka before any big All Black game.
Absolutely.
And I like have you seen recently the All-Star game? And they have the All-Star Māori team, and they have the Australian Indigenous team. And then they both do a war cry.
Yep.
And that, to me, shows pride in their culture. And if more European Australians had more connection to that and appreciated it a little bit more, maybe given it a bit more respect, I think this sort of argument, this tokenistic argument of a day where both sides are trying to put so much emphasis and so much pain and grief on one day, that it all snowballs. You know what I mean? So I think
I agree
if we did these little things a little bit better, like learning certain words, why don't we know how to say hello in Aboriginal?
Absolutely.
And I don't care, like there's 200 different fucking dialects. There's got to be like one word that normally means something in all there's got to be something.
Absolutely.
Close.
There is.
So that's
what is it?
There's which way, there's too deadly, because there are 600 languages. The Maori culture has one language. One language. But what brother here said, absolutely correct. When the All-Stars game will come, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait people will be smashed. How dare they try to separate? You do that in New Zealand, it's celebrated.
I mean, your national anthem starts
Māori,
in Maori and then moves into a bit of Crowded House, is it? No, I mean a bit of English. And I think that embraces, and I think it would be amazing if our national anthem embraced the Aboriginal language more too.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Awesome. There's been pushback there as well.
There's always going to be
pushback. So I think there's going to be people that always disagree, but fundamentally, the country has gotten behind the actual culture and the story. The stories are a big thing. Like growing up, we have stories of an ancient warrior called Maui, and all the stories are taught through primary school. So when you hear these stories, they resonate with you. They have some sort of meaning. Like one's about how the North Island came up, and it was about a stingray. And I don't know if you noticed, but the North Island, if you look at it again, you try to find a stingray in there. It looks like a stingray. And it's a real strong story that kids attach themselves to. And then we learn the words, and then we learn songs and things like that. And here, it's not done.
We don't have that at school.
I went to high school. We learned a small portion of Aboriginal culture, but the rest of it was all about English or the Romans or something else.
I 100% agree. We definitely don't learn enough about our actual heritage, even what happened from, say, 1770. It'd be nice to learn what happened prior to that, actually have Aboriginals that know that tradition, like 40,000 odd years plus of Aboriginals.
65.
Well, it's been
proven. It's proven 65.
Even longer. Years. There's things that have been proven like 100,000. So, and see, regardless,
and it's more what Corey's talking about. It's about the reaction. Like if we start teaching Aboriginal language in schools or Torres Strait Islander language, there's feedback. One of the most hurtful things on Facebook is White Australia saying, why should we learn that? Get over it. Get over it. It is, unfortunately, we have a prime minister who's leading that talk. A prime minister who says, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about the Cricket Australia doing this token thing. It should be Australia Day. We, the First Nations communities and this is going out to Cricket Australia. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rugby Union. You give us hope.
Okay, so should we even have an Australia Day? Should we even have a day where, as a nation of multicultural people in this day and age, do we even need a day to celebrate or commemorate our history and celebrate our togetherness today?
Absolutely.
Right.
We do it now with Anzac Day. My grandfather fought in Anzac Day. I celebrate it. My daughter marched in it. We have Aboriginal First Nations people who went overseas, fought with the diggers, that actually became strong. But when they came back to Australia, they still weren't allowed to go into the pubs. They weren't even allowed into the RSL. See, Maori culture, it's embraced. It's embraced. When the Prime Minister of New Zealand opens Parliament and she speaks in Maori language, and people say, oh, well, they've got the one language. Well, the Parliament of Brisbane, the Parliament of Adelaide, there's a language that comes from that country. When we say country, that region.
Yep.
Wouldn't it be nice to do that? I'll tell you a story. In 1989-90, my late wife and I, she's an Aboriginal woman, we were invited to this council function, the Townsville City Council function. We were running late. We had to get a babysitter, and we walked into this to the front courtyard of the council, and we were a bit flustered. I was a bit windswept because back then I had an afro, a bit windswept. And as we walked in, we had to get the seats. So we're sort of struggling to get to our seats. And then the deputy mayor, Anne Bonnell, I remember her name. She started what was the first ever acknowledgement of country of culture. And when she did that, Judy and I just went, wow, wow. We went, yes. Now, our spirit, our sense of spirit of who we are and where we come from was enormous.
And that was in 1990.
1990
That
was
was
the first.
let's going to say that's 2 years before Eddie Marbo actually had some luck with getting
Native title.
exactly.
Can I-
So,
Telenolius,
can I
distinguishing it.
Can I just say something? Just on the, you know, how you're saying, should we have an Australia Day? Do we have a need for it?
Yeah.
I think we do. I don't think we should change that date. And hear me out on this one. I think we should keep it the way it is, because if you really look at what the settlers really want, so Australians, European Australians really want, is they want to celebrate a day of togetherness.
yes.
Okay. It's not about what ancestors did prior to that. For them, it's about friends and family, barbecue, sunshine, all that kind of stuff. That's what it really means to be Australian. That's
Absolutely.
within that scope, because you've inherited this beautiful land. That's what's happened. So we've inherited this beautiful land that we can do that on.
Yep.
So I think making it about that, because technically the First Fleet did land. There weren't any skirmishes that day.
Well,
If we want to get technical.
yeah, no, let's get technicals because
But that's what I mean. So having that day is about that, because the First Fleet came over with those convicts. That was the majority of the people that were on the boats.
absolutely
Right. So the convicts came, they settled, they worked. They were getting too strong for the military that were here, that were guarding the British soldiers.
Yep.
And not only that, there were free traders coming over, settling, and the gold rush happened.
Yes,
So
it
the
did.
gold rush was massive.
And
so
not
people
just
come
for
over,
British, but it was
and
Asians.
They were getting rich. They
Yep.
were getting bank, right?
Yep.
So my point being is that there's more to the day than we need to really sort of harbor this hate and pain. And I get it afterwards and throughout the history prior, it's been fucked up. You guys have been menaces, like causing all sorts of problems.
And when you say you guys,
I mean, English.
well, firstly, it's the British government.
Yeah, of course. I'm not trying to point
Yeah,
fingers
yeah.
saying
No,
you
absolutely.
yourself. I'm saying British government, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the Crown
Yes.
coming in and taking over
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
doing their thing.
Totally
So
agree.
it's been pretty shitty up until then. And like bro here was saying, that it wasn't even until 2011 where the Aboriginal soldiers were actually included in the Anzacs.
Yeah.
That's a long ass fucking time. That's too long.
It's way too long.
That's disgraceful.
Did you want to say something, Nat?
I just wanted to jump in because we did have a question and they haven't clicked the thing, so I can't see who it is. But Facebook user
Yep.
has said, it's sad what has happened to the native people of Australia that has also happened to the natives of America.
Of course.
What are your thoughts on on their struggle and how it also impacts them today?
So
They share the same socio-economic racism. And when I say racism, it's not someone calling somebody a name. Racism is about setting up a structure, an education system, a health system that is exclusive because you don't fit into the language or whatever it is. It's called institutional racism. So the First Nations, the US, I have the same issues, the socio-economic areas of oppression from colonization. And it's not a black-white issue, because I think the Australian experience, and I can only speak on the Australian experience because I watched, I've done a bit of research on Braveheart. Now, and I want to acknowledge the First Nations. I've worked for the United Nations. I've worked with the Navajo, there's about three other back in the 2000s. I worked with them in the United Nations, and we share the same, and I want to use this word, it's called poverty of spirit, poverty of identity. Because once you crush, and regardless if it happened to the Scots, and there were two white races, the English and the Scots, fighting each other. but the English wanted to actually rip out the soul of the Scots because it is actually a war tactic. When you invade a country, you take away the spirit. If you take away the spirit of a person you're trying to invade, they won't fight back. You destroy their spirit. Guess what? You've got them. You've got them.
We call that morale.
Morale
in the military.
Well, that suction, the poverty of spirit, is still alive in this country today.
Mm-hmm.
It is alive. We watch TV. Now, if you look at the television, when you look at that, we don't see anything that represents any diversity, not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait. There's not many Asians on commercial TV. There's not many Islamic people on commercial TV. People on TV look like you guys. So we're looking at this world and we're going, okay, well, I don't fit in that world, especially kids. Look at that and say, this mustn't be real because I don't belong in this world.
I grew up watching a bit of Impaja, so
well,
that's definitely, but that's regional, and that's because it's that thing. It's like, oh, so Aboriginals are occupying the regional areas of Australia, so, the Indigenous in the remote areas. But the thing is, 80% of the Indigenous population in Australia live in the cities. So I watched Impaja when I was in remote areas. We don't get access to that. We never got access to that here in the cities.
We don't see Africans on TV. We don't see Islamic people on TV. We don't see Asians people on TV. In Australia, we have this island that grows the ignorance and arrogance that we don't have to change. New Zealand, though, has embraced. You fly into Auckland Airport. My God, you're greeted by Maori culture. When you see a kid, I've worked in mental health promotion with the United Nations. And if you're a kid and you're hungry, if you're a Maori kid sitting up in a cold place, say Dunedin or down in Invercargill, it's really cold.
Really cold.
And then you're sitting there watching your national team do the haka. Man, if you're hungry, guess what? You're feeling it. You're feeling pride
and warmth,
and it really thickens the soul. It gives you fuel and it fills your poverty of spirit. When we sit there, we watch the Wallabies play, but I've got to say the Wallabies have changed. They now sing the Eora national anthem.
Yes.
But in the day when they used to get John Williamson out to sing Waltzing Matilda, and we're sitting there going, oh,
and he still didn't win.
You're like, with this, the haka, in the education system, it's embedded. When you see white kids, white Pakihas, when you see white New Zealand kids owning the haka, that is perfect.
It's pretty awesome. And the fact that the Indigenous New Zealanders allow that to happen as well. Like they don't feel offended by everybody embracing that culture, and Aboriginals wouldn't think that either of white Australians.
We would celebrate that. We look over to New Zealand in envy. You walk into any building, you see in New Zealand their coat of arms is a Maori warrior. Mm-hmm. Here we've got two of our animals, which is perfect.
Yes.
But in New Zealand, you have on the coat of arms, you have a Maori warrior celebrating.
And the Queen, isn't it? I think it's the Queen.
I'm not too sure.
It's the Queen and the.
I'll move on to
war chief.
I have a friend who's basically says that changing the date would be a step in the right direction. So, like, I don't think we should change the date. Corey, you don't think so? You think we should?
Look, we need a clean date. 26 is stained.
So here's my question to you: What difference is it going to make by changing the date? Just we're not in a good position, politically and like systemically racism with the Indigenous culture and everything that's happened, education, all this sort of stuff. We've already had an attempt at helping, and you would remember this on the 13th of February in 2008. Kevin Rudd got up there and he apologized on behalf of the Australian government for the stolen generation, okay? because a lot of where we are now comes from that, like crushing the Aboriginal soul and spirit. If you take away a lot of Aboriginal children, even if they were like half caste and that, which is what happened.
That's a racist term, brother.
Half caste. It's racist, but it's the term.
I want to call you out on that one.
You can, but it was the term that was used at the time. Okay.
Doesn't make it right.
It doesn't make it right. And the fact that I'm actually a friend of mine, a girl that I spent the whole weekend with, her grandmother was Aboriginal. So does that make her?
Is that offensive to you, bro?
Is that offensive to you?
It's offensive to, yes, it is, because that word was used in the acts. That word was used in the Protection Act.
Yes, it was.
And that any reminder of the Protection Act is hurtful. Now, the Protection Act. Now, what was the question?
So the question is, we had Kevin Rudd get up and say sorry on behalf of the Australian government, because it was the Australian government that enacted the stolen generation between 1905 and right up to 1970s, right? So he said on behalf of the Australian government, because he didn't need to be on behalf of the Australian people. Most Australian people didn't agree with what the government were doing at the time. Most genuine human beings, white or black, didn't want to see that happening. And what I've read was some diaries of white free settlers where they were against what the government was doing, taking babies away from the front yards and the houses of Aboriginal and mixed race families. But they knew, because capital punishment was still alive and well back then, they knew that if they were to try and rise up against it, that they would also probably be hung for trying to do that. So it was always a really hard thing to stand up against the government. So Kevin Rudd said, I'm sorry on behalf of the Australian government for the stolen generation. But that was 12 years ago. What has happened since he's done that? Catch that light. What has happened with our Indigenous population in the last 12 years to improve after Kevin Rudd did that?
Nothing's happened.
Nothing. Or actually, it's gotten worse.
Well,
things have gotten worse.
I think Kevin Rudd had the right intentions, but Kevin Rudd is one man. He's the Prime Minister. But if you know government is not. It's run by.
Any power.
It's the faceless.
Yeah, he's a figurehead. He's a figurehead.
He's just a show
he
puppet.
had the right intentions, but there is the general feeling is that no, well, look, we're just going to roll it. We haven't seen anything. We haven't seen any change.
Closing the gap was the.
But can I just say, I am part of the stolen generation.
Yep.
I am part of my mother telling, when we used to have white fellas come up on our stairs and sell encyclopedias, my mother would freak out, would sweat would come out of her, and she'd turn to all the kids and she'd say, government. That was my life. We had to run and hide under beds. The older brothers and sisters had to run out and hide in trees. So we're not talking ancient history. What we're talking about, there's a person here on a mic.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up with anxiety and fear in my stomach from birth because my mother was terrified. My mother could not move out of her house in Thursday Island unless she had a written permission from the protector of the Native Affairs Department. And anybody, the Native Affairs director, the delegate included any policeman, anyone that worked for the courts. If you're a gardener in the courts, guess what? You're a delegate. You could go into anybody's home under law, grab a kid because you thought that kid was better off under care. That was the life we lived. You could get a gardener, you could get the window cleaner because they worked for the courts.
Pedophile's dream, that's isn't it?
Absolutely. You know what? My late wife was raped at 8 years of age because of that very thing by police.
Now, do we still live in that world?
Absolutely.
There's not police going out doing that now, please.
My friend, they're doing it.
They just hide it a lot better now, man.
They're not.
They just
Sarge,
hide it well.
you've got to starve. Sarge, I can starve. Sarge, you've got to. It's happening with any kid. You got to wake up, brother. There's a corrupt world out there.
It is a corrupt world,
and it is not just Aboriginal Torres Strait kids. It's every kid.
All right,
it's not every kid.
That brings me.
It happens.
It could happen to anyone.
That brings me into my point. Like, if you think about it, the powers to be, if you want to take over a country, you're talking about demoralizing them, take their souls.
Absolutely.
Right. The best way to do that is divide and conquer.
Absolutely.
So the best way you divide and conquer is you pull on things like racism, like integrating migrants into certain areas to make people hostile, to rape little children and take them away from their families and all that kind of stuff.
And destroy the men.
Exactly, and destroy them and all that kind of stuff. That happens, and this is coming from our higher powers. And we say our government like it's just a throwaway comment. But like you're saying, like Kevin Rudd stood up and said sorry, which was bullshit, because he's just told to say sorry for that particular day.
Yep.
There's other guys behind him that are pulling strings. We all know that now. Call me a conspiracy theorist or not, but I'll tell you one thing, and anyone that's listening, can you tell me tell me your honest answer. Do you trust the government? Just, do you trust the government? If you say yes, then I'll hear what you have to say. If you say no, then you got to question everything they fucking say and do. Like my boy was saying here, it's been so long. He's part of the stolen generation. They were doing that to his mum, to his fucking grandma. I buried my grandma last month. She didn't go through anything like that.
Yep.
But his grandma did.
Yep.
And his mum did. And he had to in a certain way. All right. So that reverberates through history and time. So people are going to cause their own destruction in their own communities, especially fueled by alcohol.
And I'll tell you,
especially fueled by drugs.
And brother, what I'm going to say is, I'm going to tell you a story. When I went to school in grade 1, my mother didn't take me into downtown Townsville because she was frightened of the authorities. We were told, hold mum's hand, look on the ground. Do not look up. Mum would say, look down, look down. We looked down. And it just happened. If there was a non-Indigenous guy walking towards us with a little tie, he could have been the banker or the laundryman, but he looked like a government authority. My mother would say, government. This is me. Yep. So I had to look down, and then we'd have to walk and be invisible because my mother was terrified, just like every other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person in the 1970s. This is the 1970s. I'm here talking on this podcast. Now, the thing is, we need to change the date because that date is stained. And the argument is 3 words. 3 words. You know what the words are? Listen to us. By keeping the date, that has just been shut. We've been gagged yet again.
Sorry to cut you off. Sorry. I'm just going to jump in here, and I've got a quick question, and we are going to go to a break in a moment. So I want you to have a think about the question that I'm going to ask you. But obviously, you're really passionate about this subject.
I'm actually quite emotional as we speak.
I love it, and you should be, rightfully so. But what I want to ask you is, with this, we've got the Aboriginal people who have suffered this systemic racism, the stolen generation, you're the First Nations people, yet today Aboriginal people make up 3% of the population, yet 29% of them are incarcerated. Aboriginal culture seems to have the most prevalence with drugs and drink, and there's communities that are dry communities. I don't know enough about it to but I'm asking your opinion, and has this all stemmed from this time in the 70s that you personally lived through? And I want you to think about that, because we are going to go to a break.
I've got the answer. We'll go for a break.
I know you do. So we'll have a think about that. We'll go to a break, and when we come back, we can answer that.
Sure.
Awesome. Back soon.
Thank you.
Commercial break.
Yeah, like really short.
Is there actually a commercial?
Yeah.
Hi, welcome to the Motor Hospital, where I've got a story for you, but it's not from the Motor Hospital.
Come on, mate. I'm going to answer that question off the bat. If people just to paraphrase, you're asking me, why are people still like high incarceration rate? Number one. Also, in terms of substance abuse, number 2. Now, there's two areas there. Now, regardless if you're Aboriginal, regardless if you're Torres Strait, if you're part of a group of people who have been absolutely the poverty of spirit, your humanity, your identity has been stripped. You have no hope. Hope it actually functions. I think if I go around this table, you have some optimism that you will go forward. Now, we have intergenerational people, trauma, that it's no use. Our people used to say, why go to school? You won't get a job, because they didn't get a job. So without hope, you turn to any substance abuse. And regardless of culture, it's just what human beings do.
I totally understand that. So I guess is how do we break the cycle?
But I tell you what, if you change the date, we had Kevin Rudd give us the apology. If a prime minister, if Jacinta Ardern was the prime minister of this country, this is a wish. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on my social, we got about 15. I'm on 15 pages. We all say, oh, we wish that woman was part of this country. But like Kevin Rudd, he had the intent. But you've got a caucus who they ain't got the intent. New Zealand, they have marry people there. So if you change the date, it is a signal to say, guess what?
A step in the right direction.
They're listening to us.
Yeah, but Kevin Rudd, by saying sorry, was a sign, a significant.
So we've got a
moment
question here from Bethany. If we don't change the date, what are some practical ways that we can honour our First Nations people? But if we do change the date, how can we make the new date different? How can we be more inclusive? That's a great question, Bethany.
Thank you, Bethany. Bethany, I worked in the city today because I'm really flash today. They commented on my dress, and thank you guys because noticing. I had some business meetings, and
you look fly, man.
Looks good, man.
Boom.
Look at those guns.
Boom. I caught a lift in a building in the city, and in that lift, it actually said Invasion Day. It said all these things about invasion, and I thought, my God, this is in a building. I'm telling you now black fella own a building in the city. We don't own that. I don't want to stereotype, but we've got a building manager who said, right, let's do this. Also, a colleague sent to me, the Berry Street Foundation sent out, they've got 15,000 staff. They sent an email out saying, this Invasion Day, like we feel like we're being heard. So to answer your question, if the date stayed the same, to identify the day as an Invasion Day, not have the Prime Minister say, get over it, like this is with the tall ships.
Can I say, I'm going to interject here, because if the first day that the first fleet landed in Australia was the 18th of January, not the 26th of January. If you want to call anything an invasion day, wouldn't it be the first day that a white settler set foot on Australian shores to invade? So firstly, white settlers didn't come here to invade. They came here because America said, we're the United States of America now, Mother England. Don't you send our convicts over here anymore. Send them somewhere else. So then Mother England sends them to Australia, okay, which wasn't called Australia at the time, obviously. Okay. Now, whether that was the right thing to do or not, that's, but it's happened. White settlers didn't come here to invade the country. They didn't come here to wipe out the Aboriginal community. They come here to actually create a penal colony and set up and try to actually work in with the Aboriginals to start with.
Can I say something? Isn't that just charged? Just saying that there, Invasion Day?
So
we call the 26th Invasion Day, right?
Yeah.
The media calls that. The media calls it Invasion Day to charge everyone up. You're charged up about it.
Yeah.
You're charged up about it.
It's not even the right date if you're going to call it an invasion day. It should have been the 18th of January.
But you're just arguing semantics now. You're arguing technicalities where it's really irrelevant.
On the 24th of January, how do you pronounce it? The Gurrugal people of Sydney Cove, 20 of those men on the 24th swum out to the ship that Arthur Phillip was on, the HMAS Supply, and had dinner. They had dinner okay, before a flag was even rose or anything. And it was a civil dinner and they communicated. This was not about being a war. This was not about an invasion. This was about trying to live with each other.
I can hear you saying that.
So it's not an invasion. It was never an invasion. It became a war when both parties just couldn't agree and they started fighting each other. Now,
if
you can't turn around and say English going around the world have been peaceful throughout all their encounters and then work with the native people.
No, of course not.
No, but they never did that.
Sarge,
They came in and they tried, because it happened to them. If we look back, the Vikings did it to the English. The Romans did it to the English.
Okay,
so everyone does it to everyone.
It's an invasion. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck.
But even invasions,
you cannot rose-colored invasion. Brother, wake up, smell the roses.
Dude, if I come to your township and I move in without your permission and I move in next door and then I start to try to communicate with you because I want to live next to you in peace and harmony, right? Am I invading you? I know you haven't laughed, but the thing is, Sarge, it was even okay. So he's military man, and I have to have this argument with you because that's what this is about. Debate. Yeah.
It's an argument, but it's not, But
the thing is, you've got a military man tasked with a job, and his job was to bring the First Fleet over here and set up a colony where they could have convicts. Now, I don't think that's necessarily correct, but it wasn't wasn't to create a war, wasn't to cull the indigenous and get rid of them and then claim the country as their own.
But hear what you're saying. You're bringing the worst people over from England to another continent.
Yeah, that sucks. And I don't agree with that. Absolutely.
If you let's reverse this. If you were over in America and you're bringing up Mexicans that were criminals, a whole bunch of Americans wouldn't like that either. So
they built a wall.
They built a wall.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see their point in the sense where, look, we didn't want settlers over. But
yes,
look, I honestly think, and personally, I don't agree with Invasion Day. I don't like calling it that. I don't like calling it Australia Day. I think the day needs to stay a certain way for certain people because it means something to them. We need to celebrate another day for unity. What's the day that Kevin Rudd said something?
The 3rd of June.
Why don't we do that then?
Well, what about Mabo?
But that's what I'm saying.
What about Mabo on a day where Eddie Mabo, and he wasn't even around when it happened, but that was
guys, there's two. You got to listen to me. I'm a First Nations person. The 26th of January is offensive. It is too stained. Let us get to a space that we can negotiate to start the discussion on what you're saying.
That was 12 years ago when Kevin Rudd said sorry.
So I think what you're saying is if we need a day of recognition.
Why can't that be on the 26th?
Can we do that? Is that something we can?
Yes, we can. And you know what that day is? It's Anzac Day. Because you know what the first conflict that this country was involved in? Both black and white?
The Boer War.
The Frontier Wars. That was a war. And Sarge may try to glorify that like it's like a bivouac.
That's the right word, but no. Go on.
English is my third language, but you can't the frontier.
Hold up, sorry. I'm just gonna. What are your first two languages? Miriam Mare. Yeah.
Kara Nitigur.
So they're both.
Kasabad you Kaikai no. That's I grew up with that language. My second language is Torres Strait Creole. Yeah, which way? You got big paisu.
Is that a form of pidgin English?
Yeah.
Because
so English, I went to school. I couldn't participate. I had to go to a speech therapist.
So what's the first language called?
Miriam Mare.
Miriam Mare.
Miriam.
And is that
that's Torres Strait.
That's Torres Strait.
There are 600 languages in this country.
Can I ask you a question? And I know I'm going to
answer in Miriam.
So ignorant. Please don't answer it in Miriam because I won't understand. Aboriginal and Torres Strait, they're
two different cultures.
Is it a similar thing? Obviously, Torres Strait Island is Torres Strait Island and Aboriginal is Aboriginal, but what's the connection? Are they completely different? Are they
fundamentally? Okay, there's two layers of cultures. It's a bit like Uluru, because I usually talk in icebergs, but who's seen an iceberg? I haven't seen an iceberg, but I've seen Uluru. Uluru, the little point of Uluru is 1/20th of the whole rock. It's underground. So in terms of the cultural practice, we have cultural different. Well, there were 600. Now, see, the thing is, in the Maori culture, there was one language. That's correct, bro.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the culture here, there was 600. There were six. He was like Europe. There were 600 countries. That's why when you said "Welcome to country," this is our country. So those practice of the culture, obviously, like if you're at Botany Bay, your culture is based on the salt water. And generally, you know, in Manly in Sydney, you know why it's called Manly in Sydney? Because what's his name? Macquarie went to Manly and he saw the Aboriginal men, because they were eating whale fat. They were manly. They had abs. Whereas the Parramatta mob, who were starving, weren't so manly. So this is manly. So there were different cultures.
Don't tell any Manly supporters that. Jesus.
We all don't like Manly. But no, sorry. But see, so the culture, the culture is 600 different cultures. There are now 7 different cultures where I come from, but we have a foundation. The foundation is connected to where we come from. We don't own Mother Earth. We're custodians. We protect Mother Earth. That's the charter for all cultures. And the other thing is family is everything. Family is everything. And the third point is spirituality, our dreaming story. My totem is the shark. My daughters have dreams. My daughter's 33. She has dreams of sharks. She has dreams of crocodiles. That's our totem. When she tells me, Dad, I had a dream of crocodile, my big brother says, oh, good girl. You're dreaming. Our old people are talking to you.
All right.
So that's the diversity of culture.
That's beautiful.
And this is
that's
what it
awesome.
needs to be. So I think, as you said, like, you know, maybe we need to educate our children on an Aboriginal dialect or whatever. But I think more important than that is we need to educate all of our Australian children on the Dreamtime stories.
All right, I'm gonna.
As you were saying with
Can we educate everyone, not just our children?
No, but if we're putting it in curriculum.
Dreamtime.
It has to be the children. I'm afraid the old hairy adult, Australian adult, both black and white, it's too late. We need to start with the children. Now I'm going to ask you a question.
Not if you take DMT.
I'm going to ask you a question. Name me 4 American Indian tribes, the lot of you.
The Navajo,
the
Apaches,
Cherokees,
the Iroquois,
All right. Name 4 Aboriginal tribes.
the Gurra. Oh, I can never get. I can't get my tongue around the
There.
language.
Time's up.
Yeah.
You were struggling.
Eora?
You were struggling to
Eora?
name.
Actually,
See, that's the mic
Garagal
drop there.
man, Garagal, Eora.
Okay, you were struggling.
I got
And that's because you researched, didn't it?
yesterday.
do you know what? Can I?
You
I'm
were
just-
struggling. No, can I speak?
Of
Like
course you can.
you were struggling. When I said American, you went boom, 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 boom.
But why?
But because the demonization of black people in this country is continuing today. I work in Europe.
I just jump in?
No, I've been.
You
I've
can't even argue.
no,
against
no.
them.
You
No,
can't.
Nat.
It's not argue because I'm feeling I'm being victimized. No. I've been to Europe 17 times.
I just want to give my reason as to why I didn't say anything.
It doesn't matter.
Because
I believe you.
I grew up. I've lived in Aboriginal communities, so I did know them. So I just wanted to give the boys
Not
a
good
chance.
enough. Not good
Oh,
enough.
get out.
Okay. I've
That's
been
even
to,
worse. You
I've
shouldn't have
been,
said anything.
I've been to Europe. I've been to Europe 17 times since. And you know why I go to Europe? Because when I go to Europe, I feel like I'm free. I wake up and I go in. I love Paris. I love London. I dated an Aboriginal girl who looked like you, blonde hair, blue eyed. She was Aboriginal. We go to a barbecue in Brisbane and we say, oh, she's Aboriginal. They go, no, you're not. You're not. You Aboriginal? Are you serious? I was in London, in Brixton, in an Airbnb, and we sat there, and I said to Swedish people, I said to German couple, and I said to an English couple, because we all shared the same kitchen, I said, my girlfriend's Aboriginal. Well, they treated her like a rock star. They treated her like, you're Aboriginal? Wow, tell us about your culture. I got a barbecue in Belmont or a barbecue in Capalaba and tell them that this is an Aboriginal girl. They go, oh, bullshit. You're not black. You're white as me.
Right. So we can talk about education. All right. And we can talk about educating our children, but that's going to take a long time for those children to grow up, become politicians, and hopefully make some really good decisions for this country. But in the meantime, the government, would you agree, has tried to compensate the Indigenous population of Australia and throw money at the Indigenous. Would you
Absolutely.
agree? They throw
Absolutely.
money. And this is the way the government thinks that they can just pay off. Okay, we did the wrong thing by you. We can just pay you off by just giving you all this money. Now, what has given Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders just given them money without education? What has that done?
Can I commend you on your articulate question? That was quite an articulate question.
Thank you.
Because, no, I'm serious.
And I agree.
Because I will tell you.
Research that one heaps.
No, it shows, brother. No, seriously, thank you for that question. Because I worked in Doomadgee in 1987. Now, in 1987, now get this is a community, right?
Yep.
In 1987, in 1984, the missionaries left that community. In 1983, we had black people not allowed to leave their house until a mission bell rang.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I went there working for the government, and then we were wondering why the staff didn't turn up to the council office, because you know why? They were waiting for the mission bell to sound. We had to get in the car and go out and say, come out, come out, come out, because they were programmed to be fearful of that. But that's not the point.
No.
There was a man who's called Clarence Walden in 1987, and he got up. Mind you, he was drunk, but he said to the government, he said, you know what? You give us the torch, but you don't give us the battery to make that bloody torch work.
Yep.
And what they meant was that council building was worth like $600,000. When I first went there from Mount Isa, everything was still in flat packs and no one had unpacked.
Mm-hmm.
But the government said, oh, let's give them a council chamber.
Yep.
Let's give them computers. Let's give them desks. We've got people still burning down doors at the house because they're flat out just trying to live in a fucking house.
So I need to give you my experience. So I was in the Australian Army for 20 years. I'm an engineer and a plumber by trade. And we worked on ACAP, which was the Army Aboriginal Community Aid Program. And I've been a lot of Aboriginal communities across Western Australia, Northern Territory, South Australia, Queensland. And in 2003, I went and worked on Palm Island. Okay.
I know Palm well.
Yeah, you should. Now, in 2002, right? In 2002, Palm Island was in the Guinness World Book of Records for the most violent place in the world, not in a conflict zone, not in a war zone. Okay, because there are murders happening there like daily. I've seen more murders on Palm Island in front of my eyes than I'd ever seen in war. Okay, and the reason was because of intoxication, like drug substance abuse, and the fact that, and don't get me wrong, the fact that everything that's happened in Australia leading up to, a lot of, I think it was 45 different clan or tribe of Aboriginals all got put on the same island together. And if Indigenous communities were nomadic and were territorial, and then you've gone and put all of these almost like enemy tribes mixed to live with each other, there's going to be a lot of conflict. There's going to be a lot of violence and alcohol. And alcohol.
If you put the Croatians and the Serbs together on an island, watch the fuck out.
Yeah.
Same thing.
So here's the thing, right? In 2002, most violent place outside of a war zone
And
in
who
the
did
world
that?
was in Queensland.
Who called that?
Who called it?
The government, wasn't it?
Who caused it?
It was
No,
recognised.
Called it.
It is a symptom.
So who put them all on the island?
Oh yeah, no, the government,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, but here's the thing: for us to then go in 2003 and work there, we needed to lower the violence. And what they did was they took away all of the spirits with the alcohol,
Yep.
took away all of the spirits, took away all of that, and just left them with like basically beer. And the violence came down, right? When they were basically made all like semi-dry community, the violence comes down. We then go in the next year, and not only did we go and build some infrastructure with the local communities, Russell Crowe came out and he played a concert there, and that was awesome. Now, don't get me wrong, he was a bit of a dickhead when he came over there that time, but the Aboriginal community
hear that,
absolutely loved it. Well, if
He's
he
a
hears it,
fucking
fine.
Kiwi. What is he doing?
Well, he was getting brownie points with. I saw him on Entertainment Tonight the next week. Oh, Russell Crowe goes and plays Indigenous population in Australia.
He was great. He was great in Gladiator. I
I
loved him in Gladiator.
That was the only thing you.
Can I tell you? He spent the night there. He couldn't get off that island fast enough the next day. But here's the thing: that local Indigenous community that wanted to get some autographs from him, and that he turned his back on them and walked away from. Didn't even talk to any of them. He just came out and stayed at the army camp that we had there.
Of course he did.
Okay, he wasn't a very good advocate for for bridging the gap, let's just say. But what I'm trying to say is that of all the Aboriginal communities I've been to, the dry communities seem to work a lot better. And then also the Aboriginal elders are amazing people, but then the next lot down aren't so good and the children are just being neglected. How do we stop? We can't just keep throwing money.
That's right.
We need to do more than just money.
So is this an exclusive Aboriginal issue in terms of poverty? Like,
well, no,
you've just described poverty, man.
I have.
Poverty sucks.
It happens in housing commission areas across Australia.
We declare war on people. We don't declare war on poverty. Now, if you know, as we what date is today?
The 25th
of
January.
What year?
2021.
Yeah.
Okay. Would it surprise you if I told you Palm Island does not have clean drinking water? Would it surprise you if you turn on the tap water, it's the color of the bourbon in the bottle over there?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. Absolutely.
So here you are saying, why can't we do? You are not giving the human rights. You know, people look at Australia and think the Australian Aborigine, and I'm a Torres Strait, but I've worked in remote communities where people do not have clear drinking water.
We can, but this, I'm going to say this. Nobody is holding. Back in the day, they were basically prisoners on Palm Island. Nobody's holding them there now. They can leave. They can move interstate. They can go and rent a house somewhere else with clean water. They do not have to stay on Palm Island. So I'm arguing a point that the Australian government would argue, that people that are ignorant would argue. Now, I'm not ignorant.
It's taking
it's
personal.
Home. It is their spiritual.
It wasn't originally.
Yeah, but see, it is because it was taken away. Something, the human character has to identify something to cling on to. So when you take someone from their spiritual home, see, you and Sarge, all due respects, and you know, listeners, this man is on a journey of learning, and I appreciate that 100%. Now, you've touched on the cosmetic surface. There is underlying issues of humanity.
Of course.
If the Persians invaded England and the English were told to speak Persian, the kids were taken away, the kids were raped, the women were raped, you would have the same problems on Palm Island, in Liverpool and Manchester, in England. It's not a color issue. It's not a culture issue. It's a human issue. You abuse the human spirit of any human being. This is your action. And I've got another point before I forget. Now, when you see Aboriginal culture, not my Torres Strait, I've got Aboriginal kids. My wife is Bidjara, and I go to places and people say, "Oh yeah, you're not Aboriginal, you're Islander. You're not like them dirty bastards." And I said, "Hang on a sec, they're my children." Now, when you demonize a race of people, you demonize them to the point where there is hatred. Now, people know Muhammad Ali. You know, the great boxer.
Absolutely.
Oh, who's Muhammad Ali, man?
Who's that guy?
He fought a guy called Joe Frazier.
Yes, he did.
Now, tell me, are they both of the same culture?
Yep. Absolutely not. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. Muhammad Ali. This is an interesting study.
Yep.
Muhammad Ali had African American people calling Joe Frazier gorilla. They were the same because you know what happened? He had demonized this man. He had demonized Joe Frazier.
To try and take his spirit away.
Boom.
His morale.
Boom. It ain't about color. You go in a domestic violence relationship, the perpetrator is trying to do the spirit. But when you demonize, I tell you now, when the Prime Minister, I will say this publicly, I hate Scott Morrison. If you're listening, Scott Morrison, you are a bastard. I was going to say the C word.
If he's listening, that's awesome. We'll get good coverage. Absolutely.
Because you have just perpetuated hate and division for my grandchildren. I won't be here to protect them. If you have a prime minister that says this, get over it, the Australia. Look, I am going to join, I don't like Australian cricket because I think Shane Warne's up himself, but
well, let's be honest, it's cricket.
Pretty much is.
But, and I backed for the Indians. The Indians smashed the Aussies. God. But when Cricket Australia took a stand of justice, when the building in the Queen Street Mall had a little tribute, I was going up to the floor number 6, and when I saw that, I felt hope for my grandchildren.
See, even though that's sad, though, my bro. So, like, you're happy that the Indians beat Australia. There's not even enough pride for
you to back your own country.
For you to back your own
because
country.
it is your own.
All right,
country.
guys, we do
I'm an
have
All
to
Black
wrap
supporter.
up.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Can I just say quickly?
We do have to wrap up. So 1 point from
Each.
us all to finish up.
Okay, so my point I want to bring come across is I think personally, I think the date shouldn't change because I think there's certain minority of people that have the majority, whether we like it or not, my bro. They do. They won the battles. And that's what happens. The victors win they write the stories. That's what happens.
That's
and
a good
it's sad.
point.
It's sad to
That's a
say,
good
but
point.
it's what's happening. So it's an Anglo-Saxon Christian Catholic culture here. So I think majority need to cling to that to understand that what they have is beautiful from what other people sacrifice and what their own ancestors sacrificed. Because, you know, a lot of them didn't get it good as well, right? But the majority of the people that were here did get it bad, real bad. So my real finishing line with all of this is this isn't about white or brown, white or black. It's not about any of that. It's about the guys up the top that pull all the strings, that divide and conquer, that make us fight amongst ourselves so we don't get a conclusion or some sort of unity from it all. We're all divided by all this fucking race bullshit where it doesn't actually matter. We all need to understand and respect and appreciate ourselves and each other before we can actually move together as one. And us bickering over stupid shit like this because it's what they want to feed us, whoever they are, is what's causing this right now. So, like, I love you, man. I love you, man. There's no like fucking black or white here. For me, it's good people. And I think majority of us are good people, right? And it needs to be run by better people.
Absolutely.
Better than us.
Absolutely.
You know, because at the end of the day, I don't know anything. I really don't. I'm just some fucking brown dude sitting here drinking whiskey.
Cheers, big ears.
Kane, I'm going to give you the last
Okay.
say today. So no, me first say. Right. So I agree with you about not changing the date, and only because changing the date doesn't actually fix anything. To actually fix anything, we've had sorry from Kevin Rudd, and it hasn't changed anything.
It has to go deeper.
Things have gotten worse because the actual act of educating, not just the white Australian population on what actually happened in our history, so that we can truly understand how we got to where we are today. Okay. But also educating everyone, not just the, Indigenous population, but any sort of like poverty sort of cultures, white, black, doesn't matter, right? On actually how to live better life, how to live better. And we need to do that as a whole country. Education, we say we need to teach our children, but the thing is we need to re-educate us. I spent the whole weekend learning about a lot more. And I learned there were some things that I knew and there were some things that I didn't know, and learning about the culture and the stolen generation and Mabo and all that, even though I heard this stuff, I got really deep on the weekend. And if I can do it, anyone can do it, right? I'm the same as you. I'm a nobody, but if I'm a nobody that can learn all of this, then so can all of our kids' parents. So because if you're trying to educate your children on what to do, but they're going home to their parents and their parents are undoing all of that good work, it's not going to work. So we need to re-educate everybody, and we can't do it by just throwing money, and we literally can't do it by changing a date. It has to be more than just changing a date. So I don't think changing the dates is the answer, but I'm not against changing the date. I just don't think it's going to actually make a difference. That's what I think. So
my first line is you need to change the date. There is too much heartache and tears. We've lost elders who screamed, who walked these streets of Brisbane, who've walked the streets of Melbourne, streets of Sydney. Those people have walked for justice, and a symbolic move, a symbolic mood of peace is to say, okay, let's suspend the date and have a discussion on where we go from here. That would bring peace to the nation. But the majority of the non-First Nations voting electorate will not have it. So guess what? Politicians won't have it. So we will still go back to being outnumbered. But I've got to say this: I was proud to be an Australian on 2 occasions. I'm not proud to be Australian. I leave the country. My daughters know every year I leave the country at least once a year because I get a kick out of flying out of Australia. Because when I go into a shop in England, when I go into a shop in Abu Dhabi, when I go into a shop in Hawaii, not Hawaii, Guam, but Europe, I love Europe. And I've said to
New Zealand, bro, New Zealand.
And New Zealand, bro. That's right. I'm a All Black supporter. But I love Europe because
look at that. We've even got your Aussies going for the All Blacks.
Because when I go to Europe, I feel like free. I sense a sense of freedom, which I didn't even know I was imprisoned. I didn't know I was imprisoned. And it didn't dawn on me until I heard Stan Grant at a book launch say, I loved going, this is Stan Grant talking. He said, I loved jumping on a plane and leaving the country because I felt free. And I went, my God, I know what you're talking about, brother. Because for me to come here, to walk through IGA, people look at me because I'm black. And I was asked the question before, incarceration. I've dated white girls. We've been out and they say to me, why is that security person just looking at us? And I says, Dales, you'll get used to it. You'll get used to it.
Yeah, those white girls are trouble, man.
Because, and also with the police, you go, if I'm out, if Sarge is driving a car, I'm driving the car, I guarantee you the police will check me out more than they'll check out Sarge.
You haven't seen how I drive. I know I'll get pulled over first every time, mate.
There's an occasion where I was pulled over and there was somebody else that was doing incorrect. But all I can say is we need to change the date, and Scott Morrison he is corrupting this country across a whole range of issues. Scott Morrison, resign you.
All right. Well, Kanat, before you get us in too much trouble, Cory, thanks you two for coming in. And if there's one thing I would like to see is before we all pass on, is that you feel at home here in Australia one day. Right, mate? Free and at home.
Yeah, that'll take a long time.
Well, let's hope it happens.
You have to just get on social media. The hatred of people. You know, Aboriginal Torres Strait people turn off their social media because of the hatred.
Well, hopefully they turn it on to see you, my brother. So anyway, that's it for us today. Take it easy and enjoy Australia.